Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host.
She can't believe she's made it here to episode 50,
Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Leanne, you sound terribly sick. Is everything okay? I'm pleased to say that Leanne is absolutely fine. She's focusing on a role that isn't overly familiar to her today, so she's asked me to step in and hijack the host chair. My name is Sean Lavin, and it's an absolute pleasure to introduce you to my guest on episode 50 of the First Time Facilitator podcast. If Jordan Harbinger is colloquially known as the Larry King of podcasting, then this woman is the Jimmy Fallon. She has an infectious personality, is genuinely curious, and evokes enthusiasm in all that she does. On top of all this, she's a sausage dog lover, avid Instagram poster, and of course, a master facilitator. Leanne Hughes, welcome to your own show.
Oh, what an amazing introduction, Sean. He told me he was getting some words together, but that's the thing about Sean. He's an incredible wordsmith and definitely one person I go to when I need some advice on website copy and everything else. So thank you so much for that intro.
No, you're welcome. And it's all true, even the Jimmy Fallon bit.
I love Jimmy Fallon.
He's one of my favourites as well. So episode 50, congratulations. What a milestone. So when you launched episode 1 with Sonia McDonald, nearly a year ago, did you ever think that in 12 months' time you'd be here recording episode 50?
No, I didn't. And it's funny because I usually go in, like I've said on the show before, one of the first sort of personal development books I read was Stephen Covey's Seven Habits.
7 Habits, yeah.
And one of those is Begin with the End in Mind, which is something that I usually think about. But with this podcast, I had no idea what the end was because it was really just, I'll start this show because I want to get better at facilitation. I'm going to kick off with 4 episodes. I didn't even have any intention of going weekly. It was only when I launched and then the 4 weeks had gone past and I was thinking, right, I need to get into action. I think we need to continue this. And then I was getting feedback from people around the world and I actually liked then the focus and dedication required to release weekly. To get to 50, it was, I'm pretty surprised that I've kept it going and because I'm usually a person, and Sean, you know this, I love launching, I love new ideas and then I like moving on. But I've kept the pace with this, which is really cool.
It's been amazing, and we'll talk more from a listener's perspective a little bit later on. But I wanted to bring back to a guest who you've recently had on the show, Dave Jackson. So we fortunately got to meet him a couple of months ago at We Are Podcasts, which is a big podcasting conference held in Brisbane in October last year. And Dave is he's actually in the Hall of Fame of podcasting, but he has his own show called Because of My Podcast, and it's really cool because everybody who has a podcast seems to have all these amazing opportunities open up. So I guess I wanted to ask you, what opportunities have emerged as a direct correlation to you starting First Time Facilitator 12 months ago?
So I think I was aiming, if I could get 50 listeners per episode, that's success. And so a lot of the stuff that I was putting up as success were, downloads, all those kind of things that you can't really control. And what's been really interesting are all the benefits that are things, what I would call side effects. So I'm really noticing a big parallel between interviewing and facilitation. So by doing this every week and interviewing people, a direct side effect is that I think that my facilitation skills have improved, my ability to communicate and ask questions, because it's been a weekly practice. And
I can support that 100% from seeing your progress over the last 12 months. So for those who don't know, Leanne and I probably met about 2 years ago, and we've been working together on and off, but probably in the last 6 months we've been in the same team together. So we've really been a lot closer in our work environment. So I can actually attest to how far you've come from a facilitating perspective, but not just facilitating. You talked about interviewing, the amount of panel discussions you've done, MC gigs, all these things that come out of your continuous learning as you release a weekly podcast.
This was a project outside of work, but the benefits were all internal to start off with. So like you said, I was asked to MC a big event for the company I work for, which I sort of accepted the week before, was given the script the day before, had to facilitate panel discussions with our global executive team, and it was being all filmed and everything. And I just thought, I remember when I was on stage and I had to ask these questions that were being submitted through people that were watching the feed. I was thinking, geez, I wouldn't be able to link these two random questions together without the experience I've gained from talking to facilitators. So that served me well. And then by doing that, then it builds your profile. Then I was off at Coogee facilitating the Executive Strategy Day.
And I think there's not too many people within the business that at the drop of a dime would say, yeah, I'd love to go and facilitate an executive, not just an executive, all the leaders in the business. You're talking about 15,000 odd people who work for us, to all get together and talk about, what are we doing next year and beyond. There's not too many people within the business who would be comfortable saying, yeah, 100%, I will take that on. That'd be great.
I think we're the only two people who would say yes.
That's it. Well, yeah, possibly. There's plenty of people within the business that could do it for sure, but whether the opportunity would come to them, or they'd be thought about, or whether they would actually pursue it, are two different things. And I think what you're doing from your podcast platform and then what you've done since releasing your podcast has just given you the credibility, and you become the first person in mind when those opportunities arise.
Yeah, 100%. And one lady, Kerry Brox, who I had on the show, she's the founder of the Institute for Learning Professionals. She's based in Brisbane. So she took me out for a coffee and was just like, I love your show. Hey, Leanne, I'm going to give you membership to this. I'm going to invite you to our conference for free. And I was like, what? Yeah, it's unreal. And totally unexpected. But then going to the conference, you meet all these amazing facilitators. And then there was an awards ceremony. And luckily I was a finalist for Learning Professional of the Year for Australia. So all of this has just been a spin-off. And then another guest, Adam Musto, I reached out to him because he's a strengths facilitator and coach.
Of course, yes.
That's one of my favourite tools.
Yeah, Clifton Strengths Finder.
Yeah, and then we had a great conversation. We connected, and following that, he's like, hey, Leanne, why don't we just put in a dual proposal to speak at the Global Clifton Strengths Conference in Nebraska in 2019? So we did. He was wonderful. His strength is communication, number one, like yours, Sean. He got a proposal knocked up. We worked on something, submitted it, and now we're presenting at this global conference in America. So,
it's unbelievable.
It is. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's so fun. I'm not a big fan of corporate buzzwords, but you can really see the synergistic effect of your podcast and becoming a better interviewer, and then your audience, and even that people that you interact with, you can direct them to the podcast and they go, oh, wow, this gives you credibility, but it also helps show your personality and your strengths through that medium. Yeah. That then opens up all these, on paper, ridiculous opportunities that end up all coming together.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then I think the most ridiculous one was the We Are Podcast event that we both went to. But you just get addicted to podcasts, and we've all got our own favourites. I mean, who's your favourite podcaster?
So my very first podcast I listened to was the Joe Rogan Experience. Personally, I'm a big fan of MMA, and a friend of mine put me onto it and said, you should start listening to this because it's amazing. You'll love it. Fell in love with it. So that's always been a big one of mine. But I used to listen to a lot of Jordan Harbinger in his previous show, and now his current one, the Jordan Harbinger Show. And I sort of come and go in and out of different podcasts. I'm right into the Pineapple Project at the moment, which is one with Claire Hooper. It's all about making finance fun and simple and easy. It's great, yes. And then, of course, plenty that I've subscribed to. Obviously, First Time Facilitating me being one, but also podcasts that I'm now subscribing to from people I've met through the podcast community. It keeps evolving, but I think, Joe Rogan always has my heart.
Yeah, Sean
He was my first time, right?
Yeah, your first time podcast. That's a new spin-off for the show. And so that's right, Jordan Harbinger. And so Sean Jordan's great. And he was in Brisbane a couple of years ago. So I went to the We Are Podcast conference. We got to hang out with Jordan and his wife and did an escape room. And then both of us were like, right, we've got to go to this podcasting conference again next year. And then because of my podcast, I got to meet a guy called Ronsley, the organiser of it, and pitch the idea of emceeing. And so that was huge this year. To then be able to announce Pat Flynn and Jordan Harbinger onto stage is just, I still can't believe it.
Great. I was going to ask you about what your biggest opportunity was. And I was technically baiting you into talking about We Are Podcast, because I was actually there as a ticket holder just to be part of the whole thing, and to see you up on stage co-emceeing it and introducing all these amazing people, and just the vibe in the room and the connection that everybody had. It was something really, really special. And I could see just you up on stage, I'm like, you're in your element, right? You're absolutely in your element of what you obviously love doing and love talking about, being involved in that community. So
cool, like every conversation. And I think I ran a podcasting workshop on the weekend, just helping new podcasters get their show launched. So Sean's launching his podcast this year.
Coming soon.
And as part of that, on the drive-in, I was thinking, wow, it's going to be amazing working with podcasters, because I think anyone that listens to the medium or cares about the medium has a growth mindset, I believe, especially listening to shows like this, like First Time Facilitator, which is all about helping you become better at whatever you do, developing your confidence. You're spending time of your day listening to something that's going to build your skills. And I think podcasters are just great people. People that like podcasts, I love them. So to be at a podcasting conference, to be on stage, of course you're in your element.
That's a really interesting point. And I've always thought that because you listen to somebody's voice so often, you become really, really familiar with them. And a lot of podcasters talk about these fans come up and go, like they know so much about their life. And you're like, I've never met you before. I have no idea who you are. But I think because you've got this almost intimate relationship, even though it's a one-way street, everybody's so sort of relaxed and comfortable because you're not strangers.
Yeah.
It's only a one-way stranger relationship.
It is. It's funny. Like even Sean and I were walking on different levels of our building yesterday just to have a chat. It's the new year. We thought we'd see what everyone's up to. And ran into John and our assets team. He's like, oh, listen to your episode. And you kind of think, oh gosh, which one? Because you're like, what did I actually say on that? So you're right. You've got no idea. It's kind of one-sided. And that's why when you get feedback and when I hear from you listeners, like there's nothing better. I can see the download numbers, but to actually hear your story, hear more questions, hear where you're from, what your struggles are, then I'm like, wow, that one person this is having an impact. It's so worth it.
Isn't that huge? And the amount of people that just think, oh, I've got to do a workshop. I don't know anything about it. Oh, see if there's a podcast on it. And they just type in some buzzwords and then yours pops up. They listen in. We had someone who joined us on the weekend who just found your podcast, listened in, heard you were from Brisbane, which is where this guy was from as well. Then heard you were doing a workshop and was like, oh, I'm going to get involved. So there was, this completely random way of this guy finding out about you through your podcast because he was interested in your content, and then ended up coming to this workshop. And the value that he brought to that workshop alone was amazing.
So much value. And hey, Adam, if you're listening, came in, took photos, is a bit of a sound engineering guru. So he helped me field some questions that I wouldn't have been able to answer. And to know that you're attracting that type of person, it's so hard to believe, just because all I'm doing is talking to people that I'd want to talk to anyway, that I aspire to be. All I'm doing is recording it and sharing it with you. And look what can happen. Yeah.
And that's a great way to switch into the next stage that I'd like to talk about, which is about getting a listener's perspective. So I was doing a bit of reflection when you asked me to host your own show. Obviously, blown away, what an amazing opportunity. But also, I thought, when I think of first-time facilitators, what comes to mind? And I always think about the value that I've got out of it. So I guess I connect with your show for a couple of reasons. One being that, we're good friends and work together a lot, so we've got that familiarity in person. But two, because I'm your target audience. I'm absolutely a first-time facilitator, and I guess I've been channeling my energy into presenting and facilitating more so in the last 12 months than I ever have in my career. So I guess I've got a lot of value from many of your guests, but I wanted to take you back to episode 6 with Rachel Grace, because this is one that really stood out to me. And so Rachel is all about mindfulness and bringing mindfulness to facilitation, and she completely embodies it. Absolutely recommend you go back and listen to episode 6 with Rachel if you haven't already. And mindfulness has popped up a few times throughout the last 49 episodes, and now in the 50th episode. And even just episode 49 with Oscar Trimboli, released just yesterday in real time. What's your take on the power of mindfulness in a learning environment?
I'm not the epitome of mindfulness. I think I was talking to Sean D'Souza at the conference, and he's like, you're the opposite of calm. I was like, well, what does that mean? I think because I'm constant, my brain's always switched on. Sometimes when I go to bed is when I have my best ideas, unfortunately, and that gets me really excited. Whenever I get an idea, I've just got to move with it. So I was hearing this concept of mindfulness, and as you know, Sean, I've recently downloaded the the Headspace app. So I think the value in it is all about the being present part. And what I've learned about facilitation is, from all of my guests, is you need to kind of relinquish the control. You can prepare as much as you can, but in the moment, the timing's going to go off, a conversation might go off, someone might not be connected with the content. There's so many different variables, and really the true value of a facilitator is their ability to move with it. And you can't do that if you're stuck in your own head.
Yeah, and we talked about this a bit, about that weird state you get in where you're anxious of the past, as in, I should have done that differently. You're trying to be present in the moment because that's where the value is. But you're also thinking ahead to the future as to what's coming up. Are we running overtime? What's the environment like? You've got so many things going through your head. So bringing it back to mindfulness, to me, was really powerful through Rachel's episode with you.
Yeah, but what she's really taught me, and through the app as well, is learning how to just really being aware of what your thoughts are. Again, listen to other podcasts where you hear that the most powerful CEOs in the world, they all do 30 minutes of meditation. And the more that I hear about it, very successful people that have, that can really focus, that really get their shit done, they take that time out in the morning to get their brain into gear.
And I wonder too whether they've realised the power in it, and they're so good at it that maybe they don't need 30 minutes every day, but they can switch into a mindful state so quickly that they get the benefits even within just a few minutes of just checking in on their commute, or if they're on a plane, they can just check in with what's going on around them, get very present. And that helps get those benefits. Yeah,
and I think Rachel's probably at the front of the wave now. This is going to be, like she said, a key skill for any leader, any facilitator, anyone working in the kind of environment we're in now, where we're getting attacked with notifications on like 8 different apps on our one phone, let alone, how do we even focus our attention on the right things? So I definitely need to get better at it, and hopefully I will with this daily practice.
So going back to, say, episode 49 with Oscar Trimboli, he talked about that, where we can speak about 125 words per minute, but our brain can process up to 400. So we're wired to look for a distraction and try and fill that space with the things that are going on around us. So when an iPhone lights up with a new Instagram message or any email comes in, we're constantly distracted. So I think being even aware of being mindful and noticing that you're getting distracted and not allowing yourself to dive into it, that's a really powerful tool, which then correlates beautifully into a facilitating environment. When there are things going on, the aircon switches off or someone's phone rings, but you stay very present with what's going on.
Yes. And the funny thing is, when Oscar did say that about the 125 words, because I know I probably speak at about 200 words a minute. I speak very quickly. And I thought, okay, how do I speak at 400 words a minute so they just listen to me, which is a terrible strategy, but isn't that so self-absorbed? But
at least you're honest.
Yeah.
So I think two people who practice mindfulness and really focus on being present, they almost set themselves up to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's something that we all experience a lot doing workshops and facilitating. And I guess from my experience, being present really helps to navigate and influence the tension in a room. And one of the best ways to mold tension in a room, in my experience, has been through humour. And that's something I personally use in a lot of my presentations. And I'll throw in a picture of myself, which I've actually picked up from Andrew Tarvin, who is your guest on episode 5. But I use it to weave stories into it. So sometimes I'll put a picture of myself in a previous job and say, this is what I used to do, and this is kind of my background. And you almost get a bit of credibility from other people in the room saying, oh, you're not just this guy in a corporate outfit coming to talk to us about X. You've actually had life experience. And if nothing else, it creates some really cool conversations for the breaks. And what's your take on deliberately and impromptuly weaving humour into a workshop?
Oh, I think you have to. And this is the thing I don't get about corporate life sometimes, or when I hear people say that people sort of rein back their true personalities, and I find that really disappointing. So I think if you are a person that is cheeky and humorous, why can't you bring that into your facilitation environment? And guess what? We're all humans. And I guess my strategy is I'll do whatever it takes to engage with that team. And like you said, kind of, because I know when we work with possibly some supervisors or people that have just been dragged into the training environment.
Exactly, yeah.
And why am I here? If you can disarm them with, and I love that word because it's giving them something unexpected, and something that I like to do with all my workshops is start off a bit differently. And I don't know if that's sort of linked in because I've got a bit of a marketing background and I know how important it is to hook people in with a message. But I bring that into facilitation. So it's doing something that they're not expecting, with the podcasting workshop throwing a microphone in everyone's face.
Yeah, unexpected, but you're at a podcasting workshop. You almost should have thought that was to be expected. But as soon as you did it, everyone was like, this is uncomfortable. Yeah. And it was a really cool hurdle to jump over.
Yeah, right at the beginning. So, yeah, whatever I can do. And so I don't know if I'm funny. And look, there's some things. So I guess one of my favourite workshops was there's a team management profiling tool. And that's what you, Sean, and I spoke about when I interviewed you on the podcast.
Yeah, episode 24, if you haven't listened.
And we were running this for our strategy and growth team. So there were about 30 people, gone to the Sunshine Coast for a retreat. My manager and I went up there and I said to her, look, Cherry, we're going to go up there to run this 3-hour workshop. They're going to expect that you and I rock up. We put a PowerPoint on, we explain the tool, and then we explain their profile. That's exactly what they're expecting. So what can we do that's a bit different? And I thought of the demographic and I was like, right, so probably middle-aged men, about 80%. They would have grown up watching Star Wars. And the whole conference was about reimagining the future. And I thought Star Wars is the perfect link to that. So what we did for that workshop is we got there and we said, we're having a bit of a talk about, our favourite movies and the new Star Wars movie that's coming out. And we've actually got a snippet of the trailer and we're going to show it to you this morning. And everyone's like, oh, what? And all we did was got, the Star Wars intro text and we just changed it around and included them, what the challenges they were up for. But just made all these crazy analogies. It just completely disarmed them because they were walking and going, yeah, this is what we're expecting. And then they saw that and they're like, this is the coolest thing ever. And that's what I love.
So you put names of the people in the room in that text as part of the trailer?
Princess Leia, it was like Princess Julie, and then we're kind of paying out some other companies. I won't mention names.
No, all companies are great.
Yes. And then just talking about the challenge ahead of them. They're driving the strategy for this company. And so we kind of put that down as this was a Star Wars mission and they were the resistance.
What a cool way to start a workshop. As you said, totally disarming. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, Star Wars. Even if you're not into Star Wars, you'd be able to sense something silly is about to happen and this is going to be great.
Oh, yeah, we put the lights out, the volume was up, the bass was up. It was unreal. And, I think there's always a voice in the back of your head going, will this fly? Will this even work? And I think you just got to test it. I mean, the worst thing that could happen was that we were just going to go up there and run a predictable workshop. That was the worst thing that would happen. And
I can only imagine that if I were to go and ask someone who was in that room what's your favourite workshop you've been in, something like that would be in their top. Will come straight to mind. Oh, there was this one time there was this Star Wars intro. It was so silly, but it was really cool because it's memorable. It's so different. I think that's the goal. They're the tips and tricks that have come out of your show over the last 50 episodes where people have just picked up, or listeners have picked up little pieces and gone, that's great, I can use that, or I can put my own flavour to that. And it's almost just, if it's not a hard tip, it's just a bit of inspiration to change what they were going to do.
Yeah.
As you said, worst case, you deliver what was expected to be delivered anyway. And it's okay. And
it's okay. But that's the thing. I think the people listening to this show don't want okay. You want to be next level. That's why you're listening.
The average facilitation podcast. This is not for average
facilitator. I need to change the tagline. This is to develop and deliver workshops that kill. Yeah, there's the difference.
100%. And that's exactly what the content that's come out of all your interviews has been. What sets that person apart from, or what do they do that's different or that they see a lot of value in, and they share that with everyone. So if you've got a big workshop coming up and you've got the time to listen to 50 episodes, you will never run out of tips and tricks and information to really kill that workshop. That's awesome. So we're speaking about laughing and humorous conversations. I just wanted to come back. We were in a group conversation the other day. This was at your podcasting workshop where you were laughing and you were almost in awe as you reflected on your very first fan email that came through from a listener who was over in Canada. Talk us through the moment you received that email and realised that your voice and podcast was adding value to someone you'd never met and is on the other side of the world.
Yeah, well, I'd set up this email, hello@firsttimefacilitator.com, but I set it up and I didn't even, there was no notification. I didn't even check it. I didn't think it was worth checking because who was going to email me? And then I think about 4 or 5 episodes in, I checked it and there's an email sitting there from 2 weeks ago and says, about your podcast, and I opened it. And it was from Aminata, who I've mentioned quite frequently. We still stay in touch from the show, and she's like, I just wanted to reach out. I just picked up your podcast. You mentioned you've come to Canada to facilitate a session. I would love to meet you if you happen to be in the Toronto area. And I was like, what? that blew me away. I did a few things. I forwarded it to my husband and my dad because at that stage they were probably the only two people I thought were listening. And I was just double checking. I was looking up Aminata's name in LinkedIn just to make sure this wasn't a bot, like this was actually real. And it was like, oh, she actually does work in organisational development. And for a listener in Canada, you're like, this is unbelievable. It was, and that really pushed me and gave me the momentum just to keep it going.
Yeah, that's cool. That's something that Pat Flynn talked a bit about at the We Are podcast conference, that you're just sort of going through almost the grind of, I'm going to produce a weekly episode and find somebody and talk to them and edit it and put it out there. And you get to that point where it's sort of, it's just the same. It's the content's different. You know, I love it, but it's just another thing I've got to do. And then you start getting this feedback from the people that you're influencing and the way you're changing their life or change, in this case, changing the way they facilitate or the things they do to make people's experiences better and the value they get out of that. And that's huge. And that's if that's not enough to keep you going.
Yeah, exactly. That was so motivating. And I think the whole podcast was born, I think Pat also talks about it, when you think about what's your business idea or and it's all about scratching your own itch. And so my own itch was I wanted to be a better facilitator. And there was no podcast out there really talking about it. Lots on public speaking, but not about the two-way conversation. And so I thought, well, if I've got the same problem, surely there are others. And then when she reached out, I'm like, yeah, she's like the same person. We're the same person. All I've done is just picked up a microphone and just taped the conversation. So I'm glad that there's people, and you listeners, thank you. And I'm glad that you're getting value out of this.
I know that's amazing feedback. What's the coolest feedback that you received? Was there another piece that came through and you were it was like a fist pump moment? It was like, wow, you realise the impact that you're having on even one person.
Oh, like there's so many. What's surprising ones have been some people in our own company going, hey, I listened to your podcast, I love it. You're like, what? You're the GM of supply chain? I'll call him out. Phil Woods, our favourite guy.
Yeah.
He was listening to a few of the early episodes and I was like, what? Not in the target market, but that's so cool. So starting a Facebook group, I just thought I'll look up, maybe 3 people, you, Sean, and maybe Steph would be the main 3. And then we've got 80 people in the group. We've got a couple of listeners from Japan, big base in Washington. The
facilitation capital of the United States.
Yeah, it seems like it.
So the platform like First Time Facilitator has been great to help those people and those who really have a burning desire to make presentations fun.
Yes, that's it.
Amazing. So we've been reflecting quite a bit to go away from the listener and put it back on yourself as the host. Reflecting on your last 49 episodes, what's been the biggest aha moment for you?
What I really love the most, and I know that Jordan Harbinger, our podcasting here, it really talks about other practicals. And so on the earliest episode, and I even joked about this on the weekend, Nikki McMurray spoke about when you give an instruction to your work, to the group in the workshop, make sure you tell them the instruction before they stand up. And I didn't do it on Sunday. So I got everyone to stand up and then they gave them instruction and it was chaos. People were like going to get coffee and I'm like, I didn't listen to that advice and I've been preaching it too and I just didn't do it. But I love that. And even an Oscar in episode 49 talking about the type of pen he uses. He talked about the Artline 0.6 millimetre black pen because the writing stands out. When you take photos of it, you can see it clearly.
Wow, what detail.
Exactly. And so those kind of really practical takeaways I love as well. And then obviously the common themes, visual facilitation, how important it is to draw and write legibly. Again, not my strength because my writing is terrible and rushed. The ability to tell stories. So Matthew Dix, he started that whole sequence of me getting guests on that talk about the ability to do that. And he just role modelled it. His book, Storyworthy, I bought it and I was laughing and I was crying reading it.
Yeah, storytelling is massive. And I think great storytellers are really able to manipulate the emotional energy in a room. And that's such a skill. But it comes across in such an authentic way. And that's what makes the story so powerful.
Yeah, and it doesn't even sound like he's just staged these stories. He's like, you've got to be descriptive here and this is what you do in terms of your scripting. But when he delivers it, it just sounds completely natural. So I love that he's actually broken down that process so anyone can learn it.
And just refined those points, those really, really important the emotional triggers almost that makes that story so powerful.
Yeah. I also like, so Sean D'Souza's method, he spoke about frequent breaks and actually not cramming people with information. And what he brought up was people aren't at your workshop for information. And I was like, what? He goes, they can Google that. They're there for the connections, for the discussions, for all this other stuff. The information's there. That really made me think.
That's a really interesting point. And we talked about this on the podcast that you did with me about the power of networking, and that some of the big takeaways from being in a workshop or in a room together is just meeting other people that are like-minded, and they say, oh, it's so cool to meet that guy. I didn't realise that he did X. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. Did you like anything that we talked about outside of meeting people? But you see it a lot, and people just love that connection and creating the environment that they're allowed to do that. So Sean D'Souza is a wizard in that space.
Yeah. I hope he ends up writing that book about talent.
You're on record. You've been called out, Sean. So of all your guests, who surprised you?
I love going back to episode 1 on this. So Sonia McDonald. So we've used her at our company, and I've seen her on stages, and she's ultimately confident and she's out there and she just gives it everything on stage. And so when I spoke to her and I was asking her about nerves, and she said that, she gets nervous, I was like, what? Because I thought, I've been doing this for a couple of years now and I'm still getting nervous. But then to hear someone that's so experienced and just exudes confidence, and to hear about what they go through before stepping onto a stage, or, all their conversations, to hear that happens, and that they also get really tired after a day facilitating. I thought, again, maybe I'm just so drained, maybe this isn't for me. But to know they go through the same struggles is good. Was there a guest, or even several, I suppose, who you absolutely pinched yourself when they said, yeah, absolutely, Leanne, I would love to be on your show? Sean Lavin. Naturally. I think every time someone accepts, I'm over the moon, because there's the reason why I've asked them to be on the show. I mentioned Sean D'Souza before. So I flew to Singapore. I saw him speak at We Are Podcast in 2017, and I just loved his philosophy on life. 3 months of vacations every year. He doesn't doing Facebook ads and doing funnels and he's not Gary Vee. He's the opposite. And to know that you can have an incredible online business and not have to be this, put yourself out there like he does, it's quite refreshing. So I went to his workshop in Singapore, met him. And I think it was only on the last day or last night where I asked him, hey, would you be interested in being on my show? And he said yes. So him, Neen James. Yes, so exciting. She had so much enthusiasm. I know. And I love that she's an Australian killing it on stages in the States. And I'd heard her on Michael Port's Steal the Show. So she'd been on 4 or 5 episodes. They're very close. And I'd loved her style. So when she said yes, especially in the early days when people are supporting the show, Bob Dick, he was the guy, once you start talking to these facilitators, you realise it's actually quite a small world. So one of my guests from Perth, Sherelle Whitney, she's like, oh, you got to talk to Bob. He taught me everything I know. And then I found out he lived 5 minutes away from me. So I went to his house and recorded that. That was surprising. Having beers, just hanging out. I wish. It was 10 o'clock in the morning then. And then Drew Tarvin, who I heard about on Side Hustle School, he agreed, and he was only episode 5. So for someone like him to commit to, a lot of podcasts fail, they say 92% don't make it past episode 7. For him to commit to episode 5 was really cool. Yeah, that's great. And look at you, episode 50. You're 15 dog years in the podcasting world. It doesn't feel like dog years. It's gone really quickly. Yeah, it's been a big, fast 12 months for sure. What's one thing or some things that you've learned about yourself because of your podcast? Quite a few things. And I think I said at the beginning, it was more about, wow, I can actually honour this commitment of doing things every week. And the reason I can honour that commitment is because I know there's people that care about it. So if it was just me recording the show, no one was listening to it, there's no way I would have kept this up. But I know that I'm actually impacting people, and I want to build that trust with you, and I want to keep helping you along. So that's why I keep putting out episodes. It's the reason why, I talked about my marathon analogy as well. The thing that kept me training was I would Instagram my training photos, and there was a whole network of runners around the world that would just keep, writing to each other. And I also had a coach as well. So if I shift the accountability somewhere else, I'll do it. That's a really good lesson when it comes to anything. So if I'm going to grow my business following this, I need to figure out who's going to keep me accountable. And I feel like if I miss 1 week, I'm going to be more inclined to miss more weeks. And I don't want to do that. I'm sure it's going to happen. It's going to happen one time, and I apologise in advance, but I just want to keep the beat.
For sure, and life happens. And there'll be times where maybe you can't be as consistent as you want to be, but I think you've absolutely set that habit now. And you saying yourself just on the weekend about how, you know, I just hold myself to account that I need to release an episode at 4 p.m. on Mondays. That's what I do. That's what's expected. And I think a lot of the big players in the podcast game talk about that. You have to be consistent. You've got an audience that are expecting content on a certain time. And if you don't deliver it, they kind of go, oh, I wonder what's happened. And whether that's if they're concerned for you or whether they think you're just getting lazy or whether, now I can't listen to an episode at the same time each week like I normally would. I'm going to go find something else to listen to. And then you've potentially lost a listener because of that drop in consistency. So I think that's really cool that you weren't really sure how often you were going to release an episode initially, and then it just naturally became a weekly 4 p.m. Monday.
It did.
And that's what, and that's so cool. And there's so much power in that.
Yeah, it is. And I think the other thing I found interesting was I thought it'd be really easy to record solo episodes, but then because I facilitate all the time and I talk about a lot of different topics. But then when you're sitting in front of a computer and recording, it's very different because you don't have that feedback of other people. Something I learned about myself is that I'm actually fueled by other people.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I think it'll be very challenging for yourself now as you transition from, being basically employed to a sort of solopreneur, which we'll talk about in just a moment. You come to work every day and you've got this social group and there's people through an office and they're everywhere and there's so many touch points, there's drama, there's emails that you love, there's emails that you hate, there's things going on. So that now as you're transitioning, you sort of, I guess, find your feet, even though I'm sure that won't take long, you'll have so much more accountability on yourself to really make things happen, and you won't have those people and that feedback to test ideas and talk things through, or have easy access to those people.
Yeah, and that's something I'm very aware of it. I think I'll be at co-working spaces. I think I'll be setting up weekly breakfast with people just to keep that going.
Yeah, very good. And I think just being aware of it is huge. So if you do find yourself in a slump or it's just not quite working, you say, I need people, I need to go somewhere else, I need to interact with someone. Even if it's completely unrelated to whatever you're doing, it might just be enough to get you the energy.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And that's actually another word. There's a phrase, I was listening to episodes and I always say 100%. And I love that. So I'm going to try and think of some new phrases for you all in 2019.
We'll keep you accountable to new phrases. Fantastic. So as we've just mentioned, you're leaving your full-time job in a couple of weeks and you're heading out on your own, which is so exciting. Watching you over the last 12 months, personally, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, but I'm very, very happy for you because it's absolutely the right move and I'm sure you're going to kill it. Why venture out on your own? What was the moment where you think back to when you made that decision and what were you doing? Who were you talking with? When did that glass shatter and say, I'm resigning? This
has been something I've been thinking about, running my own thing since 2007, 2008. Okay. After reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, which my colleague Jethro at the time gave it to me. And I read that and I was like, that is a lifestyle I want. But I knew that I had to work up to it, even though he talks about, just quit your job and do this crazy stuff. The reason I've kept in employment is because I love being in big organisations. I love the drama. I love the people, and I needed more experience. I didn't have any. It's always been my intention to do my own thing. I didn't know what it was though. But because of, I guess in the last year, I've really started ramping it up because it's become more of an urgent thing. Like I was looking at future jobs in the industry I was in corporate and thinking, if I want to climb the ladder, all I'm doing is getting more responsibility. I'm getting less time. I'm not getting that much more money for all that energy. And I think if I could put that energy towards something where I'm creating it and I'm personally accountable, and if it works, it works. It's my fault. If it doesn't work, it's my fault. So I'm ready for it. I think I'm in the mindset to do it. Doing the podcast has led me to believe that there's value that I can offer the world. And when I was going through my performance stuff with my manager last year, I was reflecting on it and going, yeah, Cherry, all of this great stuff was not related to my role. And it really made me think, well, why am I still in the role? And then I was looking ahead to 2019 thinking these are all the great projects, and Leanne of 2016 would have been really excited about them, but Leanne of 2019 was like, I don't want to have to do that. And so the decision actually it was easy. And then I got the email about speaking at the conference in Ohio the same day. And I'm like, what other sign do I need? I don't need any more signals. I'm actually just battering them away now. I need to put 100% of my effort into this.
No, and I can absolutely attest to that. Having seen you over the last sort of 12 months, but when we got back from We Are podcast, I shared the story with a colleague of ours. You'd gone off to the speakers retreat that was sort of organised post the event, and I came back to work. And one of our colleagues was like, oh, how'd it go? How was Leanne? And I just looked at her and I said, she was amazing, and she's not going to be here much longer. And she's like, oh, really? This kind of skeptical, kind of like, oh, okay, response. But, right, I just saw it, and I just like, I can see that you'll hit a point where you want to chase what you love, and there'll be opportunities for you to do that full time, that you won't need your current role. And it was so cool to see. I was really excited for you.
And I don't recommend that people listening to this go, oh, I don't like my job, I'm going to quit. No. You've got to be strategic about it. And for me, this is the right pivot point. And I think the worst thing that can happen is, say things don't work out, I can just find another job. But that's the worst thing that can happen. And I think we do often play up the worst thing that can happen all the time. We're conditioned to do so to protect ourselves. Yeah,
the reality of what the worst case scenario is nowhere near what you ever imagined it. As facilitators, we experience that every time we're getting ready for a workshop. It's like, oh, I've got all this to do. What if this happens? What if that happens? And you get in there and you do it and you get through it. And after it, you're on this huge high. Like, that went so well. That was awesome. That was so much better than I thought it would be. So I think
it's a good analogy.
Yeah. And I think all your listeners can relate to that feeling. Just for you, it's happening at a much more personal level. And the cool thing is that you've created the platform yourself that's allowing you to make that jump. And I think that's something you should be really proud of.
Thanks, Sean.
So if anybody wants to get in contact with you and reach out and engage with you, potentially get you in to facilitate, MC, interview, start a podcast, whatever it is, where can they find you?
leannehughes.com is where people can find me. And it was funny because I was at a conference about 12 years ago, and the guy's like, the best real estate that you can buy is your own domain name. And every year I've just been paying like the $12 to keep it renewed without any intention of doing anything with it. I didn't think it was a worthwhile investment. Now I'm finally using it, and that's where I'm going to store all my ideas, my thoughts, workshops I'm offering, services I provide on there. And still, the podcast is still, we're going to be kicking goals with that. I'm going to have more time to dedicate it to it, do more of the short, snappy episodes. I'm looking at even kind of horizontally moving the brand, so maybe even First Time Solopreneur as another podcast, or just keep that brand moving along. As well, I've got lots of ideas, and that's the thing. I've really got to focus and pick like 2 or 3 things I'll focus on. But that's where you'll find my solopreneur side.
It was a deep breath as she just realised what's about to happen. Yeah. But it's so exciting and it's awesome. Leanne, thank you so much for everything that you do, all the great information and guests that you provide on your podcast. I personally get a lot of value out of it. I know there's heaps of people out there who do as well. Keep doing what you're doing. All the best for your near and future. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was a wonderful interview. You're highly skilled at it. And I can't wait for your episode of your podcast to be released as well. You did amazing. And it's been wonderful working with you too.
Yep, likewise. Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in to First Time Facilitator. If you like the episode, please share it with your mates or subscribe to the podcast feed in iTunes. Till next time,